I want to thank you both for coming. I'll start by introducing Sophia. Sophia Mathur is a really well-known environmentalist in Sudbury. She started lobbying politicians when she was 7 years old. She's been to the US Congress. She's been to Queen's Park, the Canadian Parliament. She was the first youth outside of Europe to join Greta Thunberg call for youth climate action. And she's been holding weekly Friday for Future Strikes for the past 2 years. MPP Jelinas and I went to go visit her last Friday at the 2-year anniversary. She's won countless awards. I'm not going to begin to list them, but many of them. And in 2019, she joined Greta Thunberg in New York. They participated in an Amnesty International panel to discuss climate change. And then they marched in the global climate strike on September 20th, the ones that we were having similarly and you and I were at in Toronto. She's also one of the 7 young people taking the Doug Ford government to court for weakening Ontario's 2030 climate target. And unbelievably, she's only 13 years old. She's in 7th grade, and this barely scratches the surface of all of her accomplishments. She's an amazing young individual. And Sophia, I'd like to introduce you to Andrea Horwath. She is the leader of the Ontario New Democratic Party. Very proud to say Andrea is the first woman to lead the Ontario NDP, and under her leadership, we have done amazing things. She led us to the official opposition status. She created a caucus with complete gender parity. She created the first Black caucus in the history of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. She created the first caucus with 3 MPPs of Indigenous descent. In terms of climate change, in May of 2019, Andrea called on the province to declare a climate emergency. She fought to keep important environmental protections in place, and she's creating a bold and progressive green platform for our party's future. From her early career in the community development to today, Andrea's always believed the government should be about giving people the opportunity to build a good life, no matter where in Ontario they live. When the province became home, spends her time traveling the province, or virtually traveling the provinces now with COVID. She loves the province and loves talking to and seeing and hearing firsthand the challenges Ontarians are facing and proposing bold solutions. She's a mom. She believes that all Ontarians deserve healthcare that they count on, high quality seniors care and public schools that give kids a great start. She's fighting for good jobs, real opportunities, and more affordable life for all Ontarians. Andrea's been a community activist, a city councillor, an MPP, the leader of our party, the leader of official opposition, but most importantly, like you, Sophia, Andrea is my friend. And like Sophia, Andrea, I met Andrea on the picket line while she was helping to fight for what's right. So I really want to thank you both for joining.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate the introduction. That's awesome. You know, I'm trying to think back, but I was actually in New York with when Greta was there with the huge climate strike march. It was fantastic. You were there too, Sophia?
Yeah, I was there. I was just in the humongous crowd, and it was actually crazy because when you were there, it just looked like you were just in your own little area, and it looked like there were about 10,000 people. But then when you saw like the big photos from above, you saw there were like hundreds of thousands of people there. Like there were a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. I was, you know, as Jamie mentioned, I've been around for a while, right? And I've been to many, you know, demonstrations, and you know, we held a demonstration years and years ago now when the Conservative government first, like when they were elected back in 1995. Long story short, 100,000 people on the streets of my city in Hamilton, which is the city that I am elected in. But I mean, other than that, I've never seen that kind of a crowd. And in fact, I think it was September 20th, I think, right? There was, I've never seen a crowd that big. It was so inspiring, and all the signs and the, you know, the messages that people had, and just the solidarity and the peacefulness, right? I mean, you know, there was nothing negative. It was all very, very peaceful and positive. And, you know, notwithstanding how troubling, you know, the reasons why we were there are, it was just it was really a fantastic showing of, you know, of the, you know, of the human imperative around addressing the climate crisis, right? It was really cool.
It definitely was really cool, and it was also great to see that it wasn't just youth. There were a lot of adults there, and some elders and people who were dressed up in costumes. So I think there's a lot of like diversity of everyone there. Basically, it was actually just awesome to participate in general.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you 100%. It was really, really diverse, and I was happy to see so many as well. So many, like, multi-generational, right? Whole families were there. It was really, really, really neat. You know, as Jamie was saying, you've got really a huge huge story in terms of the kind of initiatives you've undertaken since you were 7. So what, what spurred you on? Like, I mean, what was the moment when you knew this is your passion and that you were going to spend so much of your time and your mind and your passion and your activity, your everything on climate change and the climate crisis?
So, I mean, I was born into a family of climate activism. My mom decided that she wanted to be a climate activist when she was pregnant with me. And I always grew up knowing about it. We've done like small initiatives in our house, like trying to not use plastic. And when I got older, when I was 7 years old, instead of going to the zoo or whatever with my dad, I wanted to go lobbying with my mom because I wanted to see what it was like to be a climate activist like her. So after that day of lobbying on Parliament Hill, I found it really fun, and I thought it was really cool to talk to politicians. So I decided that I wanted to be a part of this. So I followed my mom around for a couple years. And then when I was 11 years old, I heard about Greta Thunberg and the Fridays for Future movement. And it kind of hit me of how serious this climate crisis was. And it was less like my mom's job and more something that we need to take action on. So I think it led me to do what I'm doing today. And yeah, so that's basically where my activism started from the very beginning to now.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. It's interesting because a lot of, I mean, you mentioned the makeup of the people that were in New York City, but I think you would acknowledge that there are lots of young people that are leading the charge, like yourself and others. And a lot of the Fridays for Future kind of marches that are held are organized by young people, like kids in high school and even in grade school. And it's really amazing to see that happening. And I guess, it's interesting because when I was in New York, I participated in a panel and had a discussion about, about the climate crisis. And particularly, I got a question from a young woman talking about, how do we, it's not that, how do we support young people because they are really taking this on? And what do you see as, the kind of the role that young people are going to continue to play in the next, months and years to come in terms of the fight against climate change? I mean, have you thought about that? Have you ever kind of thought about what are the next things that that should be happening and that will be happening? And maybe you have some, some insider knowledge about things that are already happening. But it's something I'm really interested in because there seems to be a divide in my experience as a politician, a divide between, politicians saying, well, young people are the leaders of the future. But I think it's pretty clear that young people aren't the leaders of the future. They are literally the leaders of today. And you're somebody that proves exactly that. And on climate change and on a number of other levels too. I mean, I don't know if you participated in the last year and the whole fight back against the Ford government's cut to schools and the increase in class sizes and all those kinds of things. But young people really are taking hold of these issues that they care about and that are going to actually shape the lives that they have. And so what's your sense on the climate file of what's next for the young people's kind of leadership on the file?
Well, like as a youth, I think that most adults in the climate movement take this as more of a political issue. And because they've gone through voting, they have jobs, they have to deal with money, they have to pay taxes. But we're youth. We were born into this world, and now we're seeing that people are not taking action on this crisis. We're not thinking about money right now. We're thinking about the fact that people are not taking enough action on this. And I think that's why a lot of youth are getting involved in this, because it seems unreal that some people still don't believe in this and that some people aren't listening to the scientists. And I think that youth also have a really big impact because, I mean, before the climate movement, and you didn't really see a lot of youth protesting out on the streets, and I think it definitely caught a lot of people's attention seeing hundreds of thousands of a rally led by youth. I think that also it grabs a lot of attention from adults and definitely from politicians, because it's you you can't just see a whole bunch of youth like going to one big rally and asking for something with that, like compared to adults who are who you see a lot of on the streets and protesting for stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it's really it's really interesting that you identify that, because I think you've really got something there. I mean, it's the kind of the unencumbered passion. Do you know what I mean? It's the imperative that you continue to, as youth, to be able to bring to the activism and to the pressure on folks like me and Jamie and others, right? Who, although we're on your side, so it's a lot harder to convince others, as you identified. But I think it's really interesting that's and I can see how that's absolutely the case. Is that you're unencumbered by all of these other things, and you're it's just pure passion and pure pressure that you're bringing to the battle, right? Which is really, I think, something to acknowledge, and it's really important, because without that, then any action at all continues to follow, as you, I think, are identifying as well, falls to the bottom of the list of things to do. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there are 1,000 things that we deal with every day. Jamie would, I think, agree. But what we need is folks like young people to continue to force us to make sure that the climate crisis is at the top of our agenda. Because, really, if we don't address it, why bother addressing anything else on the agenda? You know what I mean? Because it all falls into oblivion, right?
Yeah, they're all one piece of a pie. Like, they're all related. So yeah, I definitely think youth do have a big impact on convincing people to take action, especially politicians, and the pressure that we put on you guys. Yeah.
It's good. It's important. It's really important. That leads me to the question around kind of. So I mean, Jamie gave a great introduction, and certainly, I know a little bit about the work you've been doing. But if you wanted to say that there's a couple of things that you want to see happen here in Ontario right away, or in Sudbury or the North, what would those kind of things be?
So, like the greater city of Sudbury, we would love if Ontario declared a climate emergency, because we want Ontario to keep to their word. When they say they're going to do something about the environment, we want them to keep to those words, and that's what a climate emergency will do. We also want the government of Ontario to enshrine the United Nations rights of Indigenous people under provincial law, because the Indigenous people are the first people on this land, and they deserve rights, and that definitely is related to the climate crisis. And I have a list here, I'm sorry. The Ontario government to work with the federal government to enshrine evidence-based and socially just climate accountability laws under national law. So we want cooperation with the Ontario government and the federal government, because this can't be a political issue, because it's very serious. And also something that we talk about a lot in our group and at our rallies is not to build the Highway 413 through the Greenbelt, because they're planning to build this big highway through this beautiful Greenbelt where a lot of animals' lives and trees and a whole ecosystem depends on that. So yes, and I definitely think there's lots of other things we can do, like planting trees, but those are some of the ones that I came up alongside my group when we were discussing what we talk about today.
No, that's fantastic. I'm not sure if Jamie has mentioned to you, but certainly we've been pushing the government on the UNDRIP as well. Absolutely, we've been trying to get them to. In fact, we had a motion in the legislature to declare a climate emergency. I know that your city has done that. My city, the city of Hamilton, has done that, but the Conservative government didn't support our motion. So that's troubling. In fact, they've gone backwards, as you know. Like, I'm sure you and your folks know that we weren't making great progress in the first place, but at least we had an environmental commissioner who was an outside kind of independent watchdog trying to force governments to live up to their promises and their obligations around climate change, as well as other environmental issues. So we've been pretty, I think, consistent on some of these things. But it's interesting because I never go into a meeting without some notes from my team. And one of the things that they mentioned to me is something about the Wolf Lake region. And I've been to Sudbury and Nickel Belt. I've been all around the region for years now, but I wasn't aware specifically of the Wolf Lake issue. Do you feel like chatting about it a little bit? Kind of fill me in. What's going on?
So I have the Wolf Lake thing on this list. So, well, Wolf Lake is a lake surrounded by the world's largest known, ancient red pine forest, and I think they're planning to put a mine down there or something like that. I'm sorry, I'm not very educated about it, but it's terrible because it's one of the biggest ones in the entire world, and again, a lot of plants and animals, a whole ecosystem relies on it. So we cannot get rid of stuff like that, and so that's a little bit. That's what I know so far on the issue, but yeah.
So pretty much, putting protections in place to ensure that doesn't, that we don't lose that key, asset in terms of forest, and particularly that species of trees, right?
Yeah, and for one of our events, we were actually planning to hold it down there, but sadly, because of COVID, we didn't want to gather everyone up down there because it is a really, really beautiful place.
I can imagine. Absolutely. Next time I'm in Sudbury, I'm going to have to get Jamie to take me to show me it. Do you have any, Jamie? I'm sorry, I'm hogging all the time here, and I'm not letting it be a true conversation. So I apologize for that. Jump on in.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been wonderful listening to you guys as well. It's interesting you were talking about how the youth are becoming the leaders, they're really leading the way. The first fall that I was here, we met with politicians, parliamentarians from Belgium, and they were headed into a federal election, and we asked what their number one topic was, and they said climate change. Ultimately climate change, because the youth brought so much attention to it. And when I was at that World Earth Day march in June previously, I saw that very clearly. Like, the writing is on the wall, you have to listen to it. And I'm proud of Sophia, and I'm proud of our city, Greater Sudbury, signed the declaration that we're going to hit targets. In every event that Sophia has, you have federal members, you have provincial members, you have the senator, you have people from the municipality. We're all united on getting this right. And like you are, Andrea, we really want to get it right. So Sophia, I'm curious, you have so many things that you've accomplished, but I know recently you went to the Climate Reality Leadership Global Training Program. It was put on by Al Gore. And I'm wondering if you want to share some of what you experienced there, and what were some of the takeaways that maybe we can implement right here in Ontario?
So, yes, I did go to the climate reality training because of COVID. It was held over Zoom, but it was really well done. It was online, and I did it with a couple of my friends, and we all made it in. And I think that during the training, I learned a lot of information about the climate crisis. One of the takeaway messages is that we cannot let ourselves start thinking of climate change as kind of the normal, because we've been hearing about this for a long time. So there needs to continuously be education about this, and make sure that that people don't think of it as something that we've known about for a long time. It's something that we can constantly just push to tomorrow. And so that's one of the things I took away. And I think I definitely think that here in Ontario, there are a lot of people who still care about the climate crisis, but I definitely think that we need to remember that it is still an issue, and that we still have not done enough to take action.
That's great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, related to that, how do you think in general political leaders are doing in Canada, in Ontario, on climate change? We sometimes end up within this bubble looking at each other, but as an outsider, what do you think?
I get this a lot. I get this question for interviews, and I think that a lot of our governments are taking action on this climate crisis, but I definitely think that there's a lot more that we could do, and I'm just a kid. I don't know every information there is and everything that we could do, but I definitely think if we listen to the scientists and possibly bring back the office of the Environmental Commissioner of Ontario, I think Ontario can do a lot more, and that will help Canada do even more too. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. You know, I don't disagree. And in fact, just to let you know, we have been advocating as well for the return of the Environmental Commissioner. And if we, maybe I should say, when we form government in 2022, we'll be bringing back the Environmental Commissioner for sure. I mean, it's something that's just so backwards that the government took that office away. But I don't know if you know, but we've been doing some work about to try to figure out what we would want to do in almost 2 years' time, just under 2 years' time, if we form government. And I don't know if Jamie's provided you with our document. It's kind of backwards, I guess, on the screen. It's the Green New Democratic Deal. It's Ontario's Green New Democratic Deal. In other words, it's from the Ontario NDP, and it's our kind of blueprint, our commitment, our green print maybe, in terms of some of the things that we think will be important to start actually meeting the targets, the 50% reduction, the zero target at 2050, all of these things. So the net zero target. So we've embraced all the targets, and we've actually said that we can, you know, just because they're targets doesn't mean we can't exceed them. But we've put some policy things together because you're right. I mean, you can make the commitment that you want to achieve this, but if you don't lay out, you know, the measurable things you can do to actually achieve them and then measure them, then you're not going to get anywhere, right? And it just continues to be, you know, people avoiding responsibility and avoiding taking the real action. So maybe Jamie's office can send you a copy of this if you haven't already seen it. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I believe we shared a draft early on when we were first looking into it with Sophia and her mom, and then we'll share the most recent version for sure.
Yeah, I mean, just as a bit of a caution, we were going to launch this back in April, but because of COVID, we decided to pull it back and wait because we're actually not, I don't think, at a final draft yet, because we want to. I think some of the things I've heard you talk about and others is about, you know, making sure that as we come out of COVID, we use that opportunity to, you know, as we reinvest, that we're reinvesting on a trajectory to reduce the climate crisis and GHGs, right? And we also want to make sure, as you do, that the transition is a just transition when it comes to changing our economy to make sure that we're hitting those targets. And so that looks at, I mean, I think COVID does provide a bit of an opportunity, I think, in some ways that we can use to rethink this paper a little bit. So have a look at it, and if there are things that you think we should consider, or you know, certainly let us know. But the public launch is going to be delayed a little bit because we are going to kind of relook at it. I hate to say through a COVID lens, but kind of, you know.
Yeah, and I can't wait to check it out and see what sort of things are on there. And yeah, I definitely think COVID is a way that we could kind of transition to a greener economy a lot easier than it would have been before. But yeah.
For sure.
There's some real opportunities. I'm so excited about this. I'm looking at the time. I'm trying to be respectful for everybody. I want to thank both of you are amazing leaders. You know, and I'm so happy I was able to connect both of you together. Sophia, Andrea, has had this message from the first day I met her that has been basically listen to the experts, you know, and you talked about data-driven decisions, you know, and measuring what you're doing. And it just, God, it connects so well. I'm so happy that I was able to, you know, put you virtually in the same room. The first idea of this was we thought maybe COVID would end one day and we'd have a kitchen table conversation, but just having this conversation, I think, is so important, you know, and it just speaks to, you know, Andrea, your ability to listen to people from all walks of life, all ages, all differences, and really get that voice. And, you know, we're going to tweak that Green and Democratic Deal based on feedback from people like Sophia, feedback from people across the province, feedback that we've learned through COVID. And I think it's very exciting. I just, maybe I'll throw it to Sophia and Andrea, maybe for a final comment before we sign off. Sophia?
All right. It was honestly an honor to meet with you, and I I think that it's great that you let me speak with you today and talk about policies that Ontario should have, and I think that we need a government that listens to the youth and a government that listens to the scientists and especially the Indigenous elders. And thank you for speaking with me today. And hopefully one day we'll be able to meet in person and not over Zoom.
Well, I hope so as well, Sophia. And it's absolutely been my pleasure. It's great to to know that there are folks like you, young people like you, that are going to continue to push people like Jamie and I. And I just want to end by saying that we have a number of MPPs as part of the NDP team here that are very, very passionate about the climate crisis. And we often have new ideas come to the table, and MPPs tabling bills like pieces of legislation to be debated, or just to kind of continue to keep it alive and a priority for us as the NDP. And one that recently was tabled, and this is, I'm just going to put this as my ending kind of comment. It was called Bill 224. So if you know how to look up a piece of legislation in the Ontario legislative website, Bill 224. No Time to Waste Act, Plan for Climate Action and Jobs. And this is one of the ones that we put together, and it was Peter Tabbins, who's our energy critic, as well as Butila Carpoche, who's a downtown Toronto activist, now an MPP, who's really concerned about the climate crisis. And they one of the schedules within that bill, which is just terminology for just saying a part of that bill, it includes having a look at the health piece. So having a look at a climate crisis health action plan. So we didn't have a chance to talk about that, but another thing that we're thinking about, just to let you know. So keep the ideas coming. Keep our feet to the fire, and certainly I hope, as you mentioned, that maybe the next time when we are able to be traveling around more, and when we've wrestled this COVID monster to the ground, we might be able to have that kitchen table conversation that Jamie talked about. So thank you, Jamie, too, for setting this up and having me have the opportunity to talk to such an informed, passionate, and just dedicated activist in Sophia. Thank you so much.